Esports today is a billion-dollar industry. Massive stadiums, multi-million-dollar prize pools, and players who are treated like rock stars. But it wasn't always like this. It all started in a college lab where the grand prize wasn't money or a trophy, but a magazine subscription. Imagine a world without Twitch, without YouTube gaming, without massive international tournaments, no six-figure sponsorships, no players making millions, no sold-out arenas. Esports, as we know it today, had to start somewhere. And where it started was a small university tournament in 1972, long before gaming was ever considered a real competition. The first esports tournament, October 19, 1972, Stanford University. A small group of students gathered in a lab to compete in what would become the first recorded gaming tournament in history. The Intergalactic Space War Olympics. The game? Space War. A simple two-player space combat game developed on a PDP-10 computer. The prize? A year's subscription to Rolling Stone magazine. The winner was a guy named Bruce Baumgart, making him the first known esports champion in history. But this event wasn't a movement. It wasn't a sport. It was just a bunch of computer nerds competing for fun. The idea of gaming as a profession? Unthinkable. The idea of millions watching people play video games? Laughable. But this was only the beginning. The arcade era, the 1980s. Fast forward to the late 70s and early 80s. Gaming was growing, but the focus wasn't on tournaments. It was on high scores. Players weren't battling for money. They were battling to have their name at the top of the arcade leaderboard. If you grew up in this era, you know what I'm talking about. You walked into an arcade, saw the high score on Pac-Man or Donkey Kong, and instantly knew who the best player in your town was. It was bragging rights, and back then, that was everything. Then, in 1980, gaming took a major step forward with the first large-scale gaming tournament, the Space Invaders Championship, hosted by Atari. Over 10,000 players from across the United States competed to become the ultimate Space Invaders champion. This was the moment gaming tournaments proved they could draw a crowd. The tournament got major press coverage, and suddenly, the idea of gaming as a serious competition didn't seem so far-fetched. Companies took notice. Arcade owners realized tournaments brought in more business. And from that point forward, gaming wasn't just about beating the game. It was about beating other players. As competition grew, so did the need for legitimacy. In 1981, Twin Galaxies was founded by Walter Day to track world records in video games. It became the official scoreboard of gaming, the place where the best of the best proved themselves. If you wanted to be a legend in the 80s, you had to get your name in the Twin Galaxies record books. And this wasn't just for fun. People took it seriously. The best players were featured in magazines, interviewed on TV, and even made appearances on shows like That's Incredible and The Tonight Show. The competitive arcade scene also gave us one of gaming's earliest rivalries, Billy Mitchell versus Steve Wiebe in Donkey Kong. Their high-score battle became legendary, even inspiring the 2007 documentary The King of Kong. But as much as the arcade scene thrived, it had one major flaw. It was limited. You could only compete against players who lived near you. There was no online matchmaking, no way to challenge someone across the country. That would change with the rise of PC gaming. The rise of online and LAN competitions, the 1990s. The 90s were a turning point. Arcades were slowly dying and gaming was moving into living rooms. Consoles like the NES, Sega Genesis, and PlayStation were making gaming more accessible than ever. But the real revolution was happening on PC. For the first time, players could connect over the internet. Games like Doom and Quake introduced online deathmatches, where players could face off without being in the same room. This wasn't just a step forward, it was the future. And then there was Quake, a game that defined early competitive PC gaming. In 1997, the Red Annihilation Tournament was held, and the winner, Dennis Thresh Fong, didn't just take home prize money. He won Quake developer John Carmack's Ferrari. That moment proved that gaming wasn't just a hobby anymore. You could win real prizes. You could make a living. As online gaming exploded, official esports organizations began forming. The Cyber Athlete Professional League, CPL, was founded in 1997, bringing structure to competitive gaming. For the first time, there were real leagues, real tournaments, and real prize pools. But while North America was slowly building its esports scene, something even bigger was happening on the other side of the world. In South Korea, StarCraft Brood War launched in 1998, and within just a few years, it would become a national obsession. Korean PC bangs, massive internet cafes, became the home of StarCraft. Players practiced for hours every day, and the game became so popular that it was broadcast on national television. South Korea was turning gaming into an actual sport years before the rest of the world caught on. Meanwhile, in the West, a new shooter was making waves, a game called Counter-Strike. What started as a simple Half-Life mod in 1999 quickly became the most competitive FPS of its era. LAN cafes everywhere were packed with players competing in 5 versus 5 matches, and it wasn't long before the first CS tournaments began popping up. By the end of the 1990s, the pieces were in place. The shift from arcades to online gaming, the rise of dedicated esports leagues, and the birth of iconic games like StarCraft and Counter-Strike set the foundation for what was to come. But esports was still underground. It wasn't mainstream yet. It wasn't a billion-dollar industry. That would come in the next decade as tournaments grew, sponsorships arrived, and the best players became household names. In the next episode, we'll explore how esports exploded in the 2000s, how Counter-Strike and StarCraft created global communities, and how gaming went from hobby to profession. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and let us know in the comments. What's the first competitive game you remember playing?